Last winter, my neighbor burnt through half a cord of wood in a single weekend. Froze, anyway. I was 3 houses down. 1 load of wood. Fire still going Monday morning. Same street. Same wind chill. Same oak from the same guy off Route 9. He came over and stood there staring at my pit like I had done something illegal. I hadn't. I had just learned something that a family in rural Pennsylvania had been doing quietly for over 200 years. And nobody in any camping guide, any hardware store, any fire-starting YouTube channel had ever once mentioned it. By the time this video ends, you are going to know exactly why your fire burns out fast, where all that heat is actually going, and how to build a fire in your own backyard this weekend that holds warmth for 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours straight. No gadgets, no special wood, no expensive equipment. Just a method. Old, tested, and almost completely forgotten outside of one very specific community in rural America. Stay with me, because the first thing I need to show you will probably make you angry. Every fire you have ever built in a backyard pit or a camping ring was designed to look good. Tall flame, orange glow, sparks drifting up into the dark sky. That image is everywhere. It is on the cover of every outdoor magazine. It is in every campfire scene in every movie set in the woods. And it is one of the least efficient ways a human being can generate heat outdoors. Here is the simple truth nobody says out loud. A tall flame is a losing flame. Every inch of fire that rises above your woodpile is heat leaving your body and climbing into the sky where it helps nobody. You are not warming your hands. You are warming the atmosphere. The wood is gone in 90 minutes. The ground around the pit reads cold by 11 o'clock. And you are inside watching television because the fire gave up before you did. This is not your fault. You were taught the wrong method. And the wrong method has been sold to you for decades, because the right one does not require you to buy anything. I first heard about this from an older gentleman named Thomas, a retired agricultural historian who had spent 30 years documenting traditional farming practices in Lancaster County and Holmes County, Ohio. He told me that most of what modern Americans believe about outdoor fire is a post-war invention, shaped almost entirely by the camping and outdoor leisure industry that exploded in the 1950s. Steel fire rings, pre-built patio pits, bags of kiln-dried firewood sold at gas stations for $14. All of it engineered for appearance, none of it engineered for efficiency. He told me that communities that never plugged into the grid, never bought into the magazine version of what a fire should look like, were still using something older, something that came across the Atlantic with German-speaking settlers in the 1700s. He called it ground fire discipline. I thought he was exaggerating. He was not. The principle is simple, but it goes against every instinct you have built up around fire. You stop building up. You start building down. Instead of stacking wood above the surface and letting the flame climb skyward, you sink the fire below ground level. You dig a main pit roughly 12 inches wide and 15 inches deep. Walls slightly tapered inward, narrow at the base, slightly wider at the top. Then, about 10 inches away from the main pit, on the side facing the wind, you dig a second smaller hole, 6 inches across, 10 inches deep. Then you connect the 2 holes at the bottom with a tunnel just wide enough to slide your forearm through. That tunnel is not decoration. That tunnel is the engine. Cold air at ground level hits the smaller hole, drops down, travels through the tunnel, and enters your fire from directly underneath, right at the base where combustion is happening. It works like a hand pump that never stops. No batteries. No moving parts. Just natural air pressure doing what physics has always allowed it to do. The fire below ground does not chase the wind. The wind feeds the fire. The soil around the pit stops acting like cold ground and starts acting like the walls of a furnace. It absorbs heat during the burn and throws it back inward. The wood does not just burn, it bakes. And instead of heat rising straight up into the cold sky, it rolls outward, at ground level, low and steady. The way a heated floor warms a room. I tested this with an infrared thermometer, the kind you can pick up at any hardware store for around $30. The soil around a properly built-in ground pit, 8 hours after the last visible flame, was still reading above 180 degrees Fahrenheit. My old above-ground ring on the same night was cold and damp before sunrise. That gap, right there, is the entire argument. After the Second World War, America went on a spending run that changed how people related to almost everything, including fire. Outdoor living became a leisure category. Fire became a lifestyle product. Companies sold you the image of a roaring blaze, because a roaring blaze looks dramatic in a photograph. A low, quiet, efficient underground fire looks like a hole in your yard. It does not photograph well. It does not sell lighter fluid. It does not move steel, fire rings, or propane tabletops. So the industry quietly walked away from efficiency and sold used spectacle instead. The communities that kept the old knowledge were not buying magazines or shopping at outdoor retailers. They were heating their farms, cooking their meals, and running their sugar operations the same way their grandparents had shown them, with a method that predated the United States itself. A household manual, written in Old German script and dated to the mid-1700s, describes this bare-wood fire method explicitly. It was carried across the Atlantic by farming families who settled in what is now eastern Pennsylvania. That document did not end up in any mainstream American homesteading guide. It stayed in wooden boxes, in farmhouse attics, passed from one generation to the next, in the language of quiet demonstration. Grandfather showing grandson, not because it was secret, but because the people who knew it had no reason to believe anyone else had forgotten it. You do not need a contractor. You do not need a permit. You do not need to own acreage. You need a shovel, a patch of bare dirt at least 4 feet from any structure, and about 40 minutes. Here is the build, step by step. Find flat ground. If your yard is grass, cut out a small square of sod cleanly with a shovel, and set it aside. You can put it back afterward and nobody will know anything was ever there. Dig your main pit. 12 inches across at the top, 15 inches deep. Taper the wall slightly inward as you go down. Measure 10 inches from the edge of that pit toward the direction the wind usually comes from. Dig your second hole there. 6 inches wide, 10 inches deep. Connect the bottoms of both holes with a tunnel. Angle it slightly upward toward the main pit, so cold air naturally flows toward the fire. Line the floor of the main pit with flat stones. River rock, field stone, old broken brick, anything dense that holds heat. Skip limestone and anything porous, because those can crack or split under sustained high heat. Stack your wood directly on those stones. Hardwood at the bottom. Faster burning hardwood, like ash or well-dried fruit wood on top. Do not mix them randomly. Layer them intentionally. Light from the top, not the bottom. Top-down ignition is one of the pieces that most people have never tried. When you light from above, the fire works its way slowly downward through the stack. Hot coals fall onto the heated stones below. The draft tunnel feeds oxygen at the base. The burn slows down and deepens, instead of rushing and collapsing. Within 20 minutes, you will notice the flame is short, almost blue at its base, and nearly silent. Within an hour, you will feel more warmth sitting beside this pit than you have ever felt standing next to a fire twice its size above ground. Everything I have described so far will already change how your fire performs. But there is one more step. The step that takes a good underground fire and turns it into something that runs through the night without a single person watching it. It comes directly from those old handwritten pages. After your fire has been burning steadily for about 90 minutes, go to your woodpile and find one piece of green hardwood. Green meaning freshly cut, not seasoned. Hickory or oak works best. No thicker than your wrist. Lay it across the top of the pit, not centered. Slightly off to one side, covering roughly half the opening. That is the entire modification. What that single piece of green wood does to your fire is almost impossible to believe, until you have seen it yourself. Because the wood is still holding moisture, it does not catch flame immediately. It sits there above the heat, and slowly begins to dry out from below. As the underside dries and begins to char, it forms a partial cap over the pit. The opening is now partially blocked. The rate at which hot air escapes upward drops dramatically. The fire below cannot accelerate into open flame because it is no longer getting unlimited oxygen from above. Combustion slows to a deep, controlled smolder. The soil walls absorb the heat. The lining stones hold it. The fire is no longer burning, it is banking. And 6, 7, 8 hours later, that green log, now fully dried and partially carbonized by hours of heat beneath it, quietly becomes part of the fuel load itself. You laid one piece of wood across a hole in the ground and bought yourself a full night of radiant warmth. No alarm set, no one taking shifts, no tending. I tested this on a November night in my own yard. Fire lit at 8:30. Green log placed just before 10. I went to bed. I walked outside at 6:15 the following morning. There was still a glowing coal bed at the base of the pit. The stones around it were warm when I pressed my palm flat against them. A small cast iron pot I had left on the edge of the pit was still holding heat. Nearly 10 hours. One load of wood. Zero attention after 10 o'clock. That is not a trick. That is 200 years of unbroken knowledge that your grandfather's generation lost, and nobody came back to return. The reason this matters is not just about fire. It is about what happens when practical knowledge gets quietly replaced by profitable knowledge. The families who kept this method alive did not do it because they were stubborn or old-fashioned. They did it because they could not afford to be inefficient. Every cord of wood represented days of physical labor. Every fire had to earn its keep. They learned which soils held heat longest after a burn ended. Cliffy ground outperformed sandy soils significantly because of how long the walls retain warmth. They learned which wood combinations lasted through the coldest nights. They learned that saving your densest hardwood for January and burning softer wood in October was not just practical. It was the difference between having enough and running short in February. One family I spoke with through Tomas, 3 generations working the same land in central Ohio, consistently heats their home and all outdoor operations on roughly 4 cords per winter. The comparable English household down the road burns through nearly double that and still complains about cold drafts. Same climate, same winter, half the wood. The method is the difference. It always was. Tonight, you got something back that was quietly taken from you. Not by accident, not by time. By an industry that figured out a long time ago that an efficient fire does not sell accessories. This weekend, go outside, dig the 2 holes, connect them at the bottom, stack your wood in layers. Light from the top, wait 90 minutes, then lay 1 piece of green wood across the opening, and go to sleep. Come back in the morning and tell me in the comments what you found. What state are you in? What soil did you dig through? How many hours did your coal bed hold? Because the mainstream guides will never build that record. We will. If this changed the way you think about something as basic and ancient as the backyard fire, then ask yourself how many other everyday things in your home are running on the wrong method because someone profited from keeping the right one buried. That question is what this channel exists to answer. One technique at a time. One forgotten manual at a time. Subscribe if you are the kind of person who wants the functional version of everything, not the version that was designed to sell you more product every season. Next video, I am going to show you how traditional farming families kept a 2-story home at a steady, comfortable temperature through a full winter using something most modern. Homeowners walk past in their own house every single morning without ever realizing what it was built to do. Keep the fire low. Keep it slow. And remember, the most powerful things were never complicated. They were just inconvenient for someone else to teach you.